Hello and welcome to Sketchbook Session 1. Today's artifacts are going to be some stylized blade concepts. We're going to need some rare items to craft these legendary weapons, starting with an ancient Colosso shard which can be found south of Mudkar Monument. It's well guarded by a pestilent mammoth named Droopy. Just east of the Sleepy Forest campsite is an old ant that watches over the ant saplings. If we manage to somehow bypass the vigilant ant, we can harvest an ant sapling claw. Just north of Shattered Chin Pass, we can find a rather close-bound group of pesky bandits. Among their ranks is a bloody chest which contains some supple crimson leather. To assemble our first weapon, we should head over to the Lost Forge, which is located northeast of Oaker's Reach. Sitting atop a hill are some rather dilapidated and foreboding ruins. Upon closer inspection, one will notice some rather interesting markings and runes, suggesting an enchantment can be placed upon our blade. Just alongside the ruin is the Lost Forge, and judging by the blood spatter on the anvil, a sacrifice is needed to shape your weapon. Placing the end claw first will activate this forge and ensure safe crafting. Failure to do so will invoke a protective evil to emerge. Once crafted, the Enaw Dagger can be leveled to +1 if it is dropped in the Tealblight River and placed in the half-buried chest located just under the waterfall at the end of the river. Our next crafting item can be found east of Murkwatch Tower. Most would walk right past this site and overlook 4 rather unassuming rocks, all of similar size standing up long ways. A bit odd indeed, as you will find no symbols or markings on these rocks suggesting their purpose or meaning. But buried in the center, you can find a Mizraic crystal core, buried long ago by some ancient mysterious race. Now standing directly in the center, the purpose of the rocks becomes clear. It is in fact an ancient compass. Follow the rock that points north towards the Crevice Crush crater. Upon first arrival to the crater, one might notice the Gnarl Grunt camp. However, if you locate the large fire made of stacked logs, smoldering inside the fire is a meteoric Nazriel shard. It would appear as though the Gnarl Grunts were attempting to smelt the meteor shard in this primitive furnace. Our next item will be found just to the north of Pangor Castle. There you will find a beautiful overlook with a shrine to the cosmic construct known as Alacronus. Lying in the fetal position is an emaciated corpse of an alchemist. Looting his corpse yields a Dynastian steel ore. With these 3 items in hand, a crystal core gunblade can be crafted at an eternally lit forge. Our final weapon requires us to acquire some very rare items, the first of which is located to the east of Spokenborn Cavern. There in a secluded waterfall we will find a fallen dragon's corpse, a crimson dread, sprawled over a large rock at the base of the falls. How the dragon came to be slain is unclear, but it seems a rather strange and specific place to die. If you can make your way down the perilous cliffside, looting the dragon's corpse should yield a red dragon hide. Now heading westward to the most dangerous regions of the Dragon's Roost, we will find the Highland Flats Graveyard. There you will find dragon fangs embedded in a treasure chest, a worthy hiding place for someone's loot. But to remove the fangs, one must have enough dexterity and strength to dislodge them perfectly. One careless slip-up could spell instant death when handling such exquisite fangs. For our final item, we must venture forth to the frozen Darkwater Cave, west of the chilled mountaintop of Altamatus. There, guarding a small gold obliterite deposit, is the abominate vampire Albinus. Slay this foe and unearth the precious ore that lies trapped within. With these items in hand, a truly unique weapon known only as the Drake-bound sword can be crafted. But first, head over to the Pyritic Pavilion and offer up the items only when the fog has enveloped the ruins completely as to obstruct all vision. Upon the fog's clearing, a weapon will be born of it, a mystical blade that can be further enchanted with a single dragon's tear. Okay, so if you made it this far in the video, what you just heard was pretty much the prompts for these weapons. Knowing the materials and a bit of the backstory kind of helps me envision the weapons and stay a bit grounded with the design. I'm using an Artist Loft watercolor sketchbook, a Kohinoor pencil or Staedtler pencil, a kneaded eraser, a watercolor brush pen, and some cheap watercolor cake palette. Along with the prompts, I started by doing a few thumbnails to establish a silhouette for each weapon that looked interesting, and this also helps to establish the proportions and balance out the materials. The more time you spend up front working out all the aspects that make your weapon read as intended, the easier it is to take it to the rendering stages. For me, the coloring stage is the most enjoyable. You can add so much depth and character to the weapon, and deciding the color combinations allows you to really put your color theory knowledge to the test. One thing I try to incorporate into the designs is a sense of shape variety. When making multiple sets of the same thing, in this case the leaves, I had small, medium, and large size, as opposed to making all the leaves the same size. The more variety, the better. Something else that I'm always thinking about is limiting detail to areas of high and low intensity. You want to create areas of detail and areas of rest. This is a delicate balancing act, but is useful in the long run, as it tends to lead to a more appealing design. The gun blade was by far the trickiest of these weapons to design, as it has a trigger mechanism, and knowing how a weapon would actually function kind of helps to sell the believability of it. Even with like fantasy weapons, I decided on a simple flintlock trigger and thought of how the crystal core would send energy through the meteor shard. It basically focuses the energy to the tip, and in the process would warp the shard over time. Thinking about these things really helps to solidify the design. In the back of my head, I have this voice asking me, would anyone want to model this in 3D, or would they be unsure as to how to go about it? In this case, I realized I needed to refine the design in areas later digitally to clarify what exactly is going on. With watercolor, you're working light to dark, so it requires you to plan ahead a bit, and so the highlights remain in the end. Adding them can be tricky, so with the gun blade I wasn't able to sell the highlights since I didn't leave enough white to work with. Something I will try to keep in mind as I take this into the finishing stages digitally. But that's what these sketches are all about. You know, you're doing a lot of problem solving here. One of the fun challenges with designing things like weapons is finding ways to sell the materials. Balancing reflective with matte finishes or metals with organics, it all helps to create this cool design. And then when working on these things digitally, it helps to push the materials as far as possible. You can do stuff like add rim lighting and really make things pop. When it comes to lighting the weapons, I keep it pretty simple. I use a top-down lighting source, and I try to avoid extreme contrast. Too many shadows, like extreme shadows, is not really helpful. If I'm doing like an illustration, I will get a little bit crazy with the lighting, but for concepts, I'm more worried about readability, so just enough light to define the forms. One of my favorite color combos is orange and blue, as it almost always never fails. Red and green is also another reliable setup, but sometimes even a single color can work. Ideally, you want to experiment with lots of different color combinations, and I tend to do this digitally as it's just easier to do it that way. So the weapons I make tend to be inspired by games like Darksiders, World of Warcraft, League of Legends, games like that, and I'm always trying to figure out what makes or defines the style or the look, but ultimately the end result is usually something that is hopefully a mix of those things and maybe a little bit of my own in there. The reason I like this style is because I feel like it has longevity. Like, those games hold up graphically. If the art direction is strong enough, I think that those games like in a few years will still look good versus something that's more realistic or not a strong art style. A finishing touch that helps these sketches pop is going over them with some kind of pen. In this case, it's a Lamy pen with some sepia ink, just to bring out the line art a bit that got lost after the watercolor was applied. And that's pretty much how I finish up these sketches. This is how I do concepts in my sketchbook. And after this, I would take them, scan them digitally, and put them into Photoshop and kind of rework them digitally, bring them to a more polished state. And maybe I'll do a video on that if you guys are interested. So yeah, guys, let me know what you think of this format. It's something I want to do more of. I just hope people find it useful or get something out of it. Even if no one watches these videos, I at least get to practice and try to make them better. So thanks for making it this far, and I'll see you in the next sketchbook session.